What you are about to hear is not a work of fiction, but a chilling account of real events reported by eyewitnesses, investigators, and historical records. If you believe that the unexplained doesn't exist, then this story might just change your mind. Bob Cranmer was a guy who thought that old houses had hidden stories waiting to be discovered. Once he wrapped up his job as a county commissioner in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he felt it was the perfect moment for a new beginning. He was always really interested in history and the tales that ancient buildings seemed to share. When he spotted an old Victorian house on Brownsville Road, it felt like the house was reaching out to him. The house was really old and had a sort of worn-out charm that made it feel unique. Even though its paint was a little worn and its windows had some cracks, Bob could see how great it could be. He thought that by looking after it and fixing it up, he could not only make it pretty again, but also revive the tales tucked away in its walls. The day Bob bought the house was sunny and warm, and he felt thrilled as he drove down Brownsville Road. As he walked up the path to the front door, neighbors watched him with curious eyes, glancing at the keys he held in his hand. The house looked really cool, with its tall, skinny windows and a roof that reached high into the sky. At the entrance stood an old iron gate, and when Bob pushed it open, he could sense the heavy history it carried with it. His heart raced with excitement and a touch of nervousness, knowing that this house had experienced so much over the years. As soon as Bob walked through the old, creaky front door, he sensed something strange, a quick, chilly tingle running down his neck. It felt like something unseen had gently touched him, and he started to question whether the chill was actually there or just in his head. The house had a scent of aged wood and stories from the past. Dust motes floated in the sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows, and with each step Bob took on the creaky wooden floor, he felt the weight of the history that surrounded him. At first, he convinced himself that it was just an old house getting used to its new life, but inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that there might be something more going on. In the beginning, Bob felt like there was someone else with him, even though he couldn't see anyone. As he rested in his simple new bedroom, the quiet of the house was occasionally interrupted by gentle noises that he couldn't quite understand. He would hear a soft creak or a far-off thump that made his heart race. One night, while he was starting to fall asleep, he heard a gentle knock on the door, a knock that didn't seem to come from a person at all. The house seemed to be whispering to him, and even though Bob felt a bit frightened, there was also a weird sense of curiosity bubbling up inside him. After that, some strange little things started to occur. Sometimes Bob would leave a door open in one room, but then he'd find it closed the next morning, and there was no sign that he had touched it at all. One afternoon, as he was reading a book in the cozy parlor, he suddenly heard a loud bang coming from somewhere deep inside the house. He leaped out of his chair and dashed to see what was going on, but all he discovered was a vacant hallway and a door that had obviously shifted by itself. Initially, Bob believed that the odd happenings could just be the sounds of an old house settling, but as the strange occurrences grew more frequent, he started to feel a sense of discomfort. On a cold evening, while Bob was brewing a cup of tea in the old kitchen, he suddenly felt a soft nudge on his shoulder. He turned around fast, his eyes big with fear, but there was nothing there. The kitchen was softly lit by a little lamp, and the shadows moved playfully along the walls. Bob's heart raced as he thought about whether someone, or maybe something, had made contact with him. The feeling was gentle yet clear, making him sense that his home wasn't completely vacant. The house felt alive, almost like it had its own spirit that was trying to talk to him, but in a way he just couldn't grasp. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky glowed a vibrant orange, Bob stumbled upon something that would alter his life forever. As he strolled down the lengthy hallway, he spotted a dark stain smeared across the wall. At first, he figured it was just a smudge or maybe an old mark that had been there for ages without anyone bothering to clean it off. But as he moved in closer, he noticed that the stain was a vivid red, just like blood. It wasn't a fresh, drippy mess. Instead, it was splatters that seemed to have been carefully spread across the wall little by little over time. Bob stood there, completely shocked, his heart racing so quickly that he felt like he might pass out. He worked hard to scrub the stain with a wet cloth, but no matter how much he rubbed, the red just wouldn't come off. That night, as Bob lay in bed, he just couldn't fall asleep. He sat quietly in the house, taking in the stillness, and thought about what could have caused such a lasting impression. The red stain looked like it was sharing stories from long ago, and Bob sensed that the house had something really important to say to him. As the weeks passed and turned into months, the odd happenings became bolder and happened more often. Every night, it felt like the house was waking up, filled with strange sounds and movements that were hard to understand. Doors would bang closed like someone was pushing them, but no one was there. Sometimes, Bob would hear quiet footsteps in the empty hallways or see shadows moving swiftly across the rooms. The house, which used to feel like a fresh start, now felt like a puzzling and scary place. Bob started to think maybe moving into the old Victorian house wasn't such a great idea after all. He worked hard to stay strong and focused on his restoration plans, but every strange thing that happened made him feel increasingly isolated. To figure out the weird things going on, Bob began writing everything down in a journal. Each day, he noted the time, the location, and a summary of what took place. He captured the noises of the creaking, the unexpected chilly gusts, and the mysterious red marks that showed up on the walls. Sometimes, he would even set up a basic camera in one of the rooms, hoping to see the mysterious force that he couldn't quite explain. As he watched the footage again, he noticed quick flashes of shadowy movement, but nothing that really helped him figure things out. The more he recorded, the more he felt sure that there was a strange, dark energy in the house, something that had been there long before he showed up. Bob wanted to find answers, so he chatted with his neighbors and looked through the old records from the area. He found out that the Victorian house on Brownsville Road had a really interesting and complicated past. Families had lived there for generations, and many had left in a hurry, talking about strange things happening that they just couldn't explain. Some of the older people in the neighborhood remembered hearing weird sounds at night, while others talked about strange smells and sudden chilly areas. People talked about a sad accident that happened in the early 1900s, and there were stories about strange deaths that no one could really understand. Even though none of these stories were written down, they made Bob feel a mix of fear and curiosity. He thought the house had taken in all the sadness and pain from before, and now that heavy feeling was reaching out to him. Even though he was getting more and more scared, Bob was set on discovering all he could about the history of where he lived. He spent a lot of time in the local library, looking through old newspapers and public records. He discovered that the house was over 100 years old and had once been home to a rich family that experienced both great successes and deep sorrows inside it. As the years went by, the family's luck faded, and the house passed from one owner to another, with each person bringing their own dreams and disappointments. Bob started to notice the red stains on the walls as signs of old stories, a reminder of the hurt that the house had seen through the years. Even as he discovered more about its history, the house kept acting in weird ways that history just couldn't explain. As the creepy things kept happening, Bob began to notice how living in a haunted house was affecting him physically. One day, while he was looking at a leaky pipe in the tight hallway, he suddenly felt a hard shove against his back. The sudden push took him by surprise, causing him to trip and gasp for air. As he spun around, he found the hallway deserted, with only the rhythmic thump of his own heartbeat breaking the silence. One day, while he was sitting in his study reading under a little lamp, a big book suddenly flew off the shelf and smacked him right on the head. Bob scratched his head and glanced around, feeling puzzled about how something could move by itself in a room with no one else around. Even though these physical attacks weren't strong enough to really hurt him, they made him feel more and more vulnerable as time went on. The house felt like it was alive, always trying to get his attention with unexpected, surprising movements. The more Bob went through, the more he realized that his home was not just an old building, but a place filled with memories that felt alive. Every strange noise, every chill in the air, every little red mark on the wall felt like a message from the past, a sign that the house, with all its stories and secrets, was still very much alive. Bob felt torn inside. One part of him wanted to escape and find a safe spot, while another part was set on staying to figure out the mystery. He thought that by facing these weird events, he could discover something significant about himself and the real story of the past. He turned into a host who didn't really want to be one, but at the same time, he was excited to learn about the mysterious forces that wandered through the halls. Every night, Bob faced his fear head-on. As he lay awake in the dark, he could hear the gentle creaking of the old wooden floors, the random taps on the walls, and the soft whisper of the wind that felt like it was bringing back voices from the past. In those moments, he sensed that the house was reaching out to him, encouraging him to recall the stories hidden deep within its walls. At times, he felt like he could hear a soft lullaby, sung by a voice that was both soothing and a little bit sad. Sometimes, he would see a shadow darting by, too fast to just be a play of light. These experiences were both scary and oddly beautiful, like seeing an old memory come back to life. Bob was really set on figuring out how to get rid of the spooky dark energy that was bothering his house, so he thought it would be a good idea to ask others for help who might know more about it. He contacted local experts in the paranormal and spiritual advisors who knew a lot about old houses and the spirits that might still be there. A kind man named Mr. Harlan came to the house and spent a few hours with Bob, looking around the rooms and listening to the stories Bob shared with him. Mr. Harlan said that sometimes a house that has seen a lot of sadness can be filled with bad energy. He mentioned that the house could use a cleansing, a special ritual to help remove the old sadness and invite in fresh, healing energy. Bob paid close attention, sensing that maybe there was a chance for something good to happen. After a lot of sleepless nights and filling up his journal with thoughts, Bob figured it was finally time for a fresh start. Feeling both nervous and excited, he set up a meeting with a few spiritual advisors and paranormal experts to come to the house. They decided to carry out a special ceremony that resembled an exorcism, intended to cleanse the negative energy that had caused so many problems for Bob. On the night of the cleansing, the sky was dark and filled with clouds, while a cool breeze swept through the deserted streets of Pittsburgh. Bob and his friends came together in the big room of the house, a place that had seen a lot of unusual things happen over the years. They brought along bundles of sage, bottles of holy water, and other things thought to chase away evil spirits. As they started their special ceremony, they talked quietly and calmly, saying prayers and good wishes in a hopeful and steady voice. The group spent a few hours wandering from one room to another at a slow pace. They sprinkled holy water along the baseboards and allowed the smoke from the burning sage to dance around the corners of each room. Bob looked closely at the advisors as they worked, sensing that the atmosphere in the house was starting to shift. For a short time, the thick darkness that had hung around the rooms started to fade, giving way to a softer, warmer feeling. Even while the ritual continued, there were times when things were interrupted. Suddenly, while the advisors were softly chanting in a quiet corner, A door banged shut so loudly that it surprised everyone in the room. The house seemed to fight back against the cleaning, as if it wanted to keep its secrets hidden away. But the advisors kept talking, their voices getting louder and more confident, until gradually the strange happenings started to fade away. When the cleansing ritual was finally over, Bob felt really tired but also a little hopeful. The red stains on the walls were still there, but they looked less bright and scary than they used to. The weird sounds had calmed down, and the doors that used to bang shut with a lot of force now just made gentle, creaking noises when they closed. Bob thought that, after a long time, he could finally stay in his house without always being scared. Even as he started to fix up and paint the house, he realized that the memories of those scary nights would stick with him for a long time. After the cleansing, the days that came after saw life in the old Victorian house gradually getting back to a sense of normal. Bob put in a lot of effort to repair the shattered windows, tidy up the dusty rooms, and add some light to the gloomy corners. He even began a little garden in the backyard, putting in flowers that brought a burst of color to the old walls. While he worked, he could still sense the house's lingering presence, but it now seemed less like a danger and more like a soft reminder of what once was. The strange sounds and the red stains were still in his journal, but now they felt like lessons, pieces of his journey that showed him about fear, hope, and the courage needed to confront the unknown. Sometimes, Bob would feel a little shiver on a chilly evening or hear a soft sound when he was by himself, and for a brief moment, he would recall the fear he had experienced before. But he also thought back to that refreshing night and the feeling of freedom that came after. He started sharing his story with neighbors and visitors, describing how an old house on Brownsville Road used to be filled with strange forces but was eventually calmed by the strength of hope and prayer. His story spread slowly around the neighborhood, and even though it never turned into a famous tale on TV or in movies, it continued to live on in whispered conversations and quiet memories of those who believed in the mysteries of the past. Eventually, Bob thought it would be a great idea to write a book about everything he went through. He used easy words, making it so that even a kid could get what he felt about being scared and brave. His book talked about the gentle taps in the darkness, the unexpected nudges that startled him, and the mysterious red marks that appeared to share an old tale. The book talked about how to face your fears and learn from what happened before, and a lot of people in Pittsburgh and even further away felt comforted by what he wrote. As time passed, Bob Cranmer got older, and the spooky house on Brownsville Road turned into a piece of local history. New families came to live in the neighborhood, and the old Victorian house was gradually changed by the passage of time and the love it received. On certain calm nights, when the wind whispered softly, some folks claimed they could hear a door bang shut or catch a glimpse of a faint red light flickering on one of the walls. For Bob, those moments were like little hints that the past was still around. It hid in the crevices of old wood and in the quiet whispers of voices that had faded away. Even though the mystery of the house was never completely figured out, Bob realized that some things are just meant to stay mysterious. He discovered that every old building tells a unique story, and often the most frightening aspects aren't the ghosts or mysterious happenings, but the strong feelings and memories that the house holds. For Bob, the journey was all about growing and learning, showing that even the darkest nights can bring about fresh starts. Many evenings, Bob would sit on the creaky front porch and watch as the neighborhood came to life with the setting sun. Kids were having fun on the street, and the neighbors smiled and waved as they walked by. In those moments, he felt a soft sense of pride in what he had done. The house that used to scare people was now a sign of strength and hope. Even though he understood that sometimes a chill could creep down his neck or an odd sound might bounce through the halls, he had come to accept these reminders as just part of the house's long, mysterious existence. The tale of the spooky house on Brownsville Road stayed a soft legend in Pittsburgh. Everyone recalled the unusual happenings and the courageous person who confronted them with unwavering resolve. Bob Cranmer's journey showed everyone that sometimes the most frightening secrets can teach us what true bravery really is. He wrote down everything in his detailed journal and later in his book. He shared his experiences with friends, neighbors, and even visitors who were curious about the hidden history of their own area. As the years changed into decades, Bob's once scary house transformed from a spot of fright into a place filled with memories. The sounds of the past were still around, but they had turned into quiet whispers that shared stories of lessons learned and challenges faced. Even on nights when a chilly breeze flowed through the rooms, Bob sensed that the house was no longer a scary place, but a calm storyteller that had seen both sadness and hope. The old Victorian on Brownsville Road became a piece of Pittsburgh's history, a spot where the past and present came together, where mysteries hung around like forgotten photos in a dusty attic, and where one man's bravery transformed fear into an adventure of exploration. Bob Cranmer's story was all about change, showing that even when faced with strange and scary things, hope can come through and bring about a fresh start. After that long, unforgettable night of cleansing, life at the old house started to find a new routine. Every day, Bob put in a lot of effort to fix the problems caused by years of being ignored and strange happenings. Little by little, the house began to get back its old charm. Even though you could still hear the old wooden floor creaking and the wallpaper softly rustling, the heavy feeling that used to hang in every room was starting to fade away. Bob felt a sense of peace in his daily tasks, like painting walls, fixing things that were broken, and planting colorful flowers in the garden. With every brushstroke and each fixed window, he sensed that he was not only fixing the house, but also healing the deep sadness that had hung around it like a shadow. Every morning, Bob would get up early and open the big, old windows to let in the bright light and fresh air of Pittsburgh. The sunlight poured into the rooms, brightening up the dark corners and bringing the old details of the Victorian architecture back to life. He would frequently stand by the window, observing the neighborhood gradually come to life, feeling a mix of thankfulness and a soft nostalgia for the moments when the house felt like a mysterious, living being. Even though the weird things happening had slowed down, Bob always had his journal nearby. He wrote down every little oddity that still popped up, a door that creaked open on its own here, a sudden chill on a summer night there. He thought these records were like clues that showed the house still had mysteries, but they were mysteries that were part of its interesting past instead of something to be scared of. People living nearby started to pay more attention to Bob's house as stories about its history circulated. People would come by to look at the old building, asking kind questions about its past. Bob would share the stories of the strange nights, the red stains that never fully disappeared, and the mysterious knocks that had once filled the silence, all in a calm and honest way. He talked about how, even though it was scary and uncertain, he discovered that the most frightening parts of a story can teach us important lessons. In these talks, Bob's easy-to-understand words and genuine feelings really moved the people who were listening. The haunted house on Brownsville Road wasn't just a scary place anymore. It turned into a symbol of strength and how people can face their fears. Over time, Bob's story spread around town, shared at local get-togethers, whispered in conversations during community events, and even featured in little articles in the local newspaper. Kids would snuggle up on their grandparents' laps, eyes big with wonder, as they heard the story of the spooky Victorian house and the courageous man who confronted the mysterious. Bob's book, filled with easy-to-understand words, turned into a beloved treasure for those who thought the old house was a sign that history was still happening and that every location had its own story to share. Even though the house didn't show the loud noises and wild movements from its spooky past anymore, there were times when you could still feel its old vibe, a little chill in a hallway, a door that quietly closed, or the gentle rustling of leaves on a breezy night. Bob handled these moments calmly, realizing that the house wasn't trying to frighten him anymore. It was just reminding him of everything it had seen. The old Victorian house was still being worked on. Bob spent lots of evenings in the garden, planting roses and marigolds that made the once dark yard look so much brighter. He would sit on a weathered wooden bench under a big oak tree and think about his journey. During these times, he remembered the scary nights, the constant tapping noises, and the strange red marks that showed up out of nowhere. He also thought about how nice the experts were when they came to help, the encouraging things his neighbors said, and the strong will he found inside himself. Every memory, whether it hurt or brought joy, became a part of his life story, stitched into the essence of that old house. On a cool fall evening, with the leaves changing to vibrant shades of orange and red, Bob thought it would be a great idea to have a small get-together at his house. He asked some of his closest friends and neighbors to come over, the ones who felt like family after all these years. They were sitting on the front porch, sipping warm cider and telling stories as the sun began to set. Bob shared his story once more, this time filled with a sense of reflection and thankfulness instead of fear. He talked about the nights filled with weird noises, the times when he sensed something was there but couldn't see it, and the long journey of getting rid of the bad vibes that finally made the house feel calm again. His friends paid close attention, their faces brightened by the soft evening light, and they were amazed by the courage it took to turn fear into a lesson about being strong. That night, when Bob walked back inside after the gathering, he stopped at the front door and took a deep breath. The chilly night air touched his face, and he felt a familiar shiver go down his spine, not from fear this time, but from a gentle memory. The house, with its soft creaks and quiet sounds, felt like it was recognizing him. The old walls seemed to express gratitude for the care, respect, and bravery that filled every corner. At that moment, Bob understood that the haunting wasn't really a curse. It was just a piece of the house's story, a chapter that would always remind him of the journey he had experienced. As time went by, the stories of the haunting slowly turned into something everyone in the area talked about. New families have come to live in the neighborhood, and even though some still talk quietly about the old Victorian house on Brownsville Road, most folks view it as a lovely piece of history that has been carefully brought back to life. Bob kept living there, taking care of his garden, writing in his journal, and occasionally smiling at the soft hints of the house's intriguing history. Sometimes, on a quiet night, he would hear a gentle knock or feel a light breeze, and he would smile, realizing that the house still had its mysteries that added to its charm instead of being scary. Even when he got older, Bob liked to sit by the window and watch everything happening outside, thinking about all the things he had learned. He frequently remembered how, when he first moved in, he had been bursting with excitement and a feeling of endless possibilities. Then the fear arrived, along with the red stains and strange noises, and for a while, he sensed that the house was filled with a creepy energy. But as time went on, with a lot of patience, bravery, and support from people who really cared about him, the darkness started to fade away. A calm understanding had developed instead, a thought that even the most frightening experiences can help us grow and learn. On a chilly winter night, with snow gently covering Brownsville Road and the stars twinkling above, Bob settled into his favorite armchair and began to write in his journal. He looked through the writings from those distant nights, the pages packed with his thoughtful notes and genuine feelings. Every word brought back memories of the fear he had experienced, but it also reminded him of the hope that had helped him keep going. As he flipped through the pages, he reflected on all the people who had listened to his story and felt a sense of comfort in his experiences. He understood that his journey, even though it was tough and puzzling, had turned into a guiding light for others, a reminder that even when life feels dark, the warmth of understanding and love can lead us back to where we belong. On that calm winter night, Bob wrote his last thoughts in the journal, and he felt really peaceful inside. The old house on Brownsville Road stood quietly, its walls echoing with memories and soft whispers from long ago. But it wasn't a scary place anymore. It had turned into a shining example of how things can change, the amazing stories of the past, and the incredible strength of people. Each creak of the floor and every quiet whisper in the dark contributed to a tale that turned fear into understanding. The haunted house on Brownsville Road, with its long hallways and soft shadows, kept standing as a quiet observer of time going by. Bob Cranmer's journey was filled with fear, cleansing, and healing. It became a story that many people shared, a tale of a man who discovered hope even in the darkest times, and who realized that sometimes the scariest secrets can teach us the most important lessons. Even though the neighborhood around him was changing, the old Victorian house stayed a beloved reminder that every building, every road, and every heart has its own story to tell. As time went on, Bob found a nice routine in his life. He could frequently be spotted strolling down Brownsville Road, saying hello to old friends and exchanging gentle smiles with those who walked by. The house had discovered its own calm and graceful presence. Even though the strange red stains and the occasional creaks still happened, people now saw them as part of the house's special charm, a reminder of its interesting history instead of a sign of danger. Bob's story was connected to the neighborhood's history, and people remembered his brave journey in gentle, respectful ways, especially those who loved the secrets of the past. On a sunny spring afternoon, Bob was busy taking care of the colorful flowers in his garden when his young neighbor, Lisa, came over with a look of curiosity in her eyes. She had listened to the rumors about the spooky house and was curious to learn more. With a friendly grin, Bob started sharing his story, beginning with the day he first entered the house, through the eerie nights filled with knocks and chilly winds, and finally to the cleansing that had restored calm to the old walls. Lisa paid close attention, her eyes widening with amazement as Bob talked about the journey from fear to hope. Bob used clear and honest words to share that sometimes the unknown isn't something to be afraid of, but rather something to learn about. His words created a vivid image of a home that had once been filled with sadness but had found healing through the strength of hope and kindness. As the sun went down on that unforgettable day, Lisa expressed her gratitude to Bob for telling his story. In her young heart, the story of the haunted house ignited a gentle curiosity, a wish to uncover the secrets of ancient places and to find the beauty in facing her fears. Bob saw her walk away and felt really happy inside. He realized that his adventure, even with its challenges and unknowns, had been worthwhile. It had impacted the lives of many and had woven itself into the vibrant history of Brownsville Road. As the sun set on countless evenings ahead, with the cool breeze rustling the leaves and the old house filled with soft memories, Bob would sit by his window and think about everything he had discovered. He understood that the haunting would never really end. It was woven into the house's identity, a piece of its very soul. But it was also a piece of who he was, a part of the ongoing tale of his life. As he looked out at the starry night, he felt really thankful for all the times he was scared and all the little bits of hope that brought him to this calm feeling. Bob Cranmer's life and the story of the haunted house on Brownsville Road show us that every old building has its own story, and every secret, even if it seems scary at first, can turn into a lesson about bravery and love. The house is still there on Brownsville Road, its walls packed with memories that will keep talking to anyone who wants to hear them. In the quiet whispers of those walls, the story of a man who bravely confronted the unknown continues,